Welcome to Blended Chaos. I'm Nikki, your host, and today's episode is tax time, that dreaded to many time of year during tax season. However, in family law, that even elevates a little bit more what the regulations are for taxes, what options, what does the court say, what does the IRS or maybe your local jurisdiction say. Tax time seems to be a major issue with many families. And as you're going to hear in this episode, it has been an issue in our blended families multiple times over many, many years. So let's go back. If you recall, we are reading messages and correspondences between our exes. Let's kind of talk about what we have lived through, and then I'm going to give a little insight on state regulations, federal regulations, and those things, because I do think it is currently March 5th, 2025, and there is lots of chatter in the world about regulations from a federal government, new ordinances, plans, and laws going to be proposed and have been proposed by our new president. So kind of what is all that going to look like moving forward? I will start with, I am also an accountant. I have my bachelor's in accounting. I am a tax preparer and registered and licensed through the IRS for tax preparation as well. So while I do this from a family law side and also mediation and stuff, I do also do taxes. And so this is something I'm very, very familiar with in both the legal world and the tax regulation world. So if we kind of think back, these messages are years and years old, but kind of one of the dynamics we were facing is Mark had started with wondering about tax issues. The discussions had been talked about with our exes, kind of leading up to this. There had been a dispute about who would claim what child. So a little bit of background, not only for our family, but for you guys as well. When a divorce, a custody, or a child support situation happens, taxes are usually part of those court orders. In all of our cases, tax regulation is part of the court order. We are assigned what children are taken by what parents in what years and how that rotation or no rotation happens. So this is going to be something where you're going to want to make sure this is documented well inside of your dispute, whether that is a paternity case, custody case, divorce case, anything like that, because there are multiple ways this can go. I will say in one of our cases, we alternate the child, and that's just all there is. In one of our cases, one party always claims the child and the other party gets a discount off of child support because they do not ever claim the child. So there are negotiations and bargainings in those situations where people are usually making that decision well in advance and not at tax time. If it is not court ordered, then you have to kind of roll back to other laws, whether that's your local law, your family court law, or the federal law itself. So in our case, what is being discussed here, I, by law, was allowed to claim the child. And so Mark, my ex, is talking to Karen and says, hey, when is the court for the tax issue? And Karen says, still waiting on the attorneys to let us know. Mark says, okay, well, I'm going to file my taxes today. So I should find out if by Friday she claimed her. Now, keep in mind, I am to claim the child. So him hurrying, this is on February 3rd of this year, him hurrying to claim the child is a bigger problem. Karen says, Anne just told me that the attorney is looking for paperwork to see if she is to be claimed. So in my first case, they're discussing who is to claim the child. And in my second case, he's saying, I already did. I rushed to do it. Karen says, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, he'll find something out, which means a month had passed since contacting him about it. And then it'll take another 14 days to notify her. And then a court date. So I'm looking at the end of March. Yippee. At one point, she says in here that they're waiting to see, she says, so still playing the waiting game because none of the men around me have any balls to prosecute her. Now, what that would have to do with prosecuting me is very beyond me, but these are the kind of dialogues in the culture you're seeing inside these cases. Mark goes back and says, yeah, by then she'll have all the money spent. Mark says, I filed my taxes and my federal was accepted already. She must not have filed yet. And Karen says, was she supposed to claim her this year? Mark says, well, ... Originally, I was supposed to, but the final orders changed at the last second, and she is supposed to for this year, making it 2 in a row for her. Karen says she's going to rip your ass. Again, they're talking about knowing that this is against court orders. Mark says, LOL, yep, and when she files her taxes, we will know now. Mark says, so I guess if you guys can get yours filed this week, then get it done. Karen says, we can't do ours because of the business and all of that. Maybe your lawyer can get her to not file yet, put a halt to it now. She has to wait till the decision in March by a judge. Mark says, freeze all actions by both parties on filing taxes till a determination on who is to file this year is made. Karen says, that won't happen anytime soon due to him being slower than molasses with these cases. This went on to then obviously start an issue wherein filing my taxes, I could not claim my daughter because she had been claimed previously. Some of you might not know, but when you electronically file taxes, the response comes back pretty quickly. We do that live in office with our clients. So it's usually a pretty fast situation where that's happening, within a moment's time. So when I filed that year, it was rejected because the child had been claimed. Fast forward, we ended up having to take Mark to court for this. I had to file a contempt proceeding in family law and then get a court-ordered agreement stating that he had to amend his taxes that year. I was able to claim the child and moving forward with what would continue to happen futuristically after that. I share this because, again, it's giving you guys insight. One, what these blended situations look like with family law, the hassle people are putting people through, the battle, but also more than that, how do you plan ahead very well inside your court orders to ensure that these things are documented? One of the biggest things we find is that undocumented items often create the most conflict, where you can see in our situation, they were documented, everybody was aware, and just blatantly disregarded the court order, wherein causing more problems moving forward. So I don't want anybody to think that, okay, well, if we plan ahead really well, none of this would happen. Ours was planned ahead really well. Some people are just jerks and do what they want regardless, until there's consequences great enough to stop them. But I don't want you to think that I'm saying, do this and then you'll never face anything we faced, because I too had planned ahead, done all of that, and made sure that, we had these documented well. A couple of things to kind of know from a tax side when you're talking about family law. There is a difference between family law regulation and federal law with the IRS. So these do not always go hand in hand. And that's a lot of what we're hearing on the media currently in 2025 is, hey, there is a family law order, but the president says that if a dad pays child support, he can now claim the child. Well, your family law court order would already be regulating that. At least that is the law in Kansas. Our court orders regulate who gets to claim the child because child support equalizes income. That does cover 50% of the child's expenses, those kind of things. Whether you agree or do not agree that child support settles that up, that is the regulation of how the law on child support works. So one of those things is knowing what the tax and the IRS code says, but that your family law court orders might trump that. You might have a child who does not live 50% of the time in a home, but the family law allows that the child still gets to be claimed on that parent's tax return. So this is not something where you have to pick or choose what legal system to follow in. Ultimately, those court orders are going to be what regulate. So sometimes we even see where a family gets a rejection and we have to send a tax return off along with the court orders that show that that rejection has been part of that paperwork, and then the court orders will overcome that tax situation. So one of the things that we have to identify there is what court has the precedence over the situation. Again, we are in Kansas. Our cases all are in Kansas, and so we regulate through Kansas family law. in our local courts rulings, but many states, if not all, this is regulated by your custody orders. So just kind of know that going in. A couple of the recommendations we like to see are parents alternating children, right? If we have a child, we go even odd, even odd. They just go back and forth. Every other year you have the child. I will say it can affect, if you don't have any other children, it can affect your withholding. 1 year you'd get a refund, 1 year you might owe. So that can get a little messy. If families have 2 children, 3 children, 4 children, usually they split them or alternate the odd child out until the children are at the age of majority. The other thing that we see is equalizing this on a child support case. So one of our cases, my husband's case, actually the mother who does not have primary residence, she has given up the tax credit so that her child support is lower each month. She wants to pay less in child support, and therefore we get the tax credit every single year. So that is an option too, and then that is part of your court order of how that works, and it stabilizes out on the child support worksheet. From the federal law side of things, the IRS uses claiming a dependent based on a 5-rule test over if you can claim a dependent. What I want to make sure most parents know from an IRS and federal side, if your court order allows for the claiming of a child, the 5-rule test is not the same thing. Your court order has regulated out the difference. The child does not live 50% of the time in the home, but your court order allows them. The one parent pays the bills, but the child support via that court order allows them to be claimed. So just know we're seeing a lot on social media right now about, oh, well, dad, if the kid doesn't live 50% at dad's house, the kid can't be claimed by dad, or vice versa by mom. That's not true when the court order regulates that out. So just know that these might not match up, and you're going to have to use the appropriate jurisdiction law to file your taxes. We did talk about the child support worksheet credits. Watch those because the age of majority is 18. In our local state, child support stops at the age of 18 or when the child graduates high school. However, the tax credit goes down at the 16 year. So currently, our child tax credit is $2,000 and reduces to $500 following that change. People are not making sure that's correct on the child support worksheet. So if you're giving a $2,000 credit throughout the year, but you're only getting a $500 credit on your tax return, it might be time to review that child support worksheet as well to make sure that this tax credit is equalized. Also keep in mind when your child has to claim themselves. So some children go on to college, they are claimed by the parents for a long time. Other children get a job in high school and cannot be claimed by their parents early on. So that's going to be another thing where we have a material change in circumstance that would also change the situation around the taxes and around the custody court orders. In the event you get a rejection, like what we faced that year, we filed our taxes, it says it's rejected, the child's already been claimed by the other parent, then what we recommend is that you would just paper mail that in along with your court order. This says, hey, here's a court order that says I get to claim the child. We need the IRS to go in and amend that. And then, they will put or could push back on the other parent. I'm not going to say that always happens. I do not know what happens internally with the IRS regarding that. I do know that in our local family law situations, the court will handle where a parent has to amend and change those credits. So the other thing to keep in mind that just because we pursue another parent in a contempt setting, like what I had to do, go to the court and say, my co-parent illegally filed this tax return, I need you to help me make it right. A contempt proceeding in your local court does not translate into a problem with the IRS. So you kind of get in two situations where you still have to clear it up with the IRS on your tax return, and you still have to clear it up with your family law situation moving forward. That's what I was talking about with those court orders. And we can attach those court orders so you can kind of see how there was an order that decided what we were going to do and what went forward. It's some great language. Some of that is a little outdated, I would say. It looks like that was filed in March of 2016. But regardless, it kind of gives you some ideas for some language to use in there. I recommend that all families decide what child and what year and what parent all situations are happening. I do not even like leaving it up in the air where families just say each parent will claim a kid. Well, that works, but then when one kid isn't claimable, what do we do with the other kid? Each parent will rotate. Well, but how do we agree when it's the rotating year or when there's not a child to rotate? So there's going to be a little of that I think a little more specific detail in your court orders is going to be highly recommended. And that's something your family law attorney, your mediator, whoever can help you write up with really good detail. I often use language like father will claim minor child, whoever, in years, whatever. Very, very detailed until they can no longer be claimed. Or mother will claim child one, father will claim child two. When child one is no longer claimable, then they will rotate in even odd. We lay that out really far in advance, and that really does cut down some of the decisive parts where you have to pick, choose, negotiate, or go back to court. Maybe your family is going along really well for years and years, unlike us. Maybe they're going along very well and everything is great, but this becomes the issue that tips the boat. It's just not worth it to have that happen. So when we kind of go back, I don't ever want people to think like, oh man, she didn't have good enough paperwork and therefore this happened to her. We had great paperwork. It's very clear and definite. He even speaks about knowing the difference. She, the other party, even speaks about, oh my gosh, haha, she's going to rip your ass, those kind of things. So they were very aware what they were doing and that what they were doing was illegal, criminally illegal. Contempt is a criminal situation inside of domestic court. You can serve jail time for contempt. So again, they very much were stepping into illegal choices and just not enough consequences to stop them from doing that. So a couple of things I just want to recap. One, make sure that your paperwork is good. Two, make sure that you do document, keep track of, make sure that you understand when filing, getting acceptance of filing. That can be accepted at the time that you file. You might get an email following up that it was accepted, or usually 72 hours after you electronically file, you can start tracking that on the IRS's website with your tax return details. So a couple of ways to just know you were not rejected, that was accepted, and what you should do from there. Pretty much past that, keep track of it, do your best, and keep co-parenting with the crazies.